Okay, hi everybody, and welcome to our very first Data Hour. I am so excited to be here chatting with all of you today, and more importantly, welcome back our amazing host, Barb, who I'm going to introduce in just a few minutes. But before we do get started and get into all of your wonderful questions and your data questions, I just want to introduce myself. So my name's Lauren. I'm the Senior Manager of Marketing and Community at Power to Fly. We host these virtual chats every single day with a different thought leader in a different industry and obviously a different topic. What makes Thursdays really special is that every Thursday we host a more interactive session. Usually it's an interview prep session, resume review, profile review where the audience gets to participate and our career coach kind of reviews their profile, which is kind of something we wanted to implement in today's chat. So we asked you to bring your data questions or projects that you're working on that are technical and kind of do the same thing. Talk about them and, talk about answers, create a really interactive session. So we're trying it out. We'd love to hear your feedback. So definitely let us know if you're tuning in today, how much you liked it or didn't like it. And if you're watching the recording, what you thought as well. So a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. This isn't super interactive. So I'm going to ask, after I go through this spiel, who has any, actual data questions that we can cover, to start. Obviously, there were a bunch of questions that were submitted, so we're going to run through those. So if you're feeling shy, don't worry. We can get to any of the additional questions at the end. But I definitely want you to write in the chat, to hop off mute, to hop on camera if you can, and really participate and engage, because that's the point of this conversation. I'm also recording, so I will be emailing out a link to that recording once it's downloaded to my computer. So probably, tomorrow or sometime on Monday. But without further ado, I am super, super excited to welcome Barb to welcome back, Barb, to our Chat and Learn stage. So thank you so much for coming and taking the time to share your knowledge with us. Our last session was awesome. You are so wonderful and a great, great instructor, and I'm glad you're feeling better today. So if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit more about you, your background, and then we can dive right in.
Thanks, Lauren. That's so sweet. And yeah, so I have a bachelor's in statistics, and I've been doing data stuff my entire career. I worked as a data analyst at a typical corporate environment first, and then I worked directly for a statistician, PhD from Harvard, taught at Harvard, like super high up in the field. He would testify in like the national court cases you would see on TV, and I did everything with him up until the point he walked into the courtroom and testified. So that was a great job. He started retiring though. He was at the end of his career, and I wanted to keep doing consulting. So now I have my own consulting firm called Boxplot, and I don't do court cases as much anymore. I do more corporate consulting, so HR departments, marketing departments, etc., who have questions about Excel, Tableau, Python, or even more heavy statistical analyses. I have a team of people who also have masters in statistics, so we do pretty much all that consulting data related.
Amazing. And obviously your skill set is just endless. I was just saying how you're a jack of all trades. So really, I'm super excited to kind of learn more and all of the great, talents that you have as a technical person. So things that I'm lacking that I really appreciate. So that's so, so awesome. I'm going to pop the questions and I just fast forwarded. Give me 1 second. I'm going to pop the questions up on the screen that you guys submitted. But before we get to these, for the purpose of this being interactive and wanting to kind of dive into your data, I love for all of you, if you have questions, to write them in the chat right now. And I'd like to give you guys an opportunity to kind of explain your question. You can share your screen, the data that you're working with, the code that you're working with, whatever that may be, and give you the opportunity to kind of ask Barb your questions. So at any time throughout the chat now or in a few minutes, I'm going to start asking the questions if no one has any pressing ones, and then we can get started. So I'm going to keep an eye on that, or just say, I'm ready to present, and then I'll switch the presenter to you. But our first question is, what data pipelines do you prefer to work with? Which ones have provided you with the best data?
Yeah, and I think it's good to talk about one like this while we're waiting for people to put in their questions too, since it's a little bit general. And I don't know if any of the people here, if you were one of the people that, or you're the person that asked this, I'd love some clarity on what you were getting at. But let's start by defining data pipeline, because I think people call it different things. So when I think of a data pipeline, I think data that's kind of moving from one place to another. So maybe your data starts off on Facebook servers. You're a marketing expert and you're trying to pull your data from Facebook's API. So it starts off with Facebook. They generate the data, they store it on their servers, and then you're pulling it maybe onto your servers. That's one step in the pipeline. Then from there, maybe it goes on to Tableau or Excel or somewhere else, and that's a small pipeline. I'm sure there's much larger ones that people may be dealing with, but that's how I think of a data pipeline, is kind of data just moving from one place to another, maybe getting transformed at some point along the process, but that's the basic definition. I usually work, I love Python. I work almost exclusively in Python. I also know R. I started on R. R is great, and it's definitely improving a lot, and it is becoming more popular in corporate environments, but it started in academia. It was kind of more of an academic program at first. So I think it's catching up a little bit to Python, but it's still, in my opinion, not quite there, especially when you want to deploy things to the web. I think Python is just much better for that. So my preferred method is to write a script that will pull the data from an API or a server somewhere, Amazon, cloud, whatever. Then I can do whatever I want with it in Python and then send it to the next point in the pipeline. So for example, something we do all of the time is we'll take the client data from an API, something like that. I do all kinds of analysis, number crunching, etc., setting up charts in Python, and then I export a bunch of smaller CSV files to Amazon S3 for storage, and then point JavaScript or whatever HTML code at those smaller files to generate charts on the web, so the charts are responsive and my clients can see them on their phone from Aruba, wherever they are, it doesn't matter, it's mobile responsive, instead of having to go back and forth with like, do we have the same version of Excel, or whatever other issues might arise from that. So that was a long-winded, I guess, answer to the first part of the question. I'll pause there. Does anybody have questions about that first half? No? Okay. The second part of this question, this is the part I'm most lost about. And if you're the person who asked is here, that would be great for clarification. Have provided you with the best data. Usually, in almost every role I've had, someone is giving you data that they want you to work with. You're not typically seeking out data on your own. The exception to that was when I was doing those research projects for the statistician. Sometimes we would have to go find our own data online. I feel like people ask me this question a lot for cases where it's not always necessary to go and grab your own data or try to find, like Census Bureau data is like a really common thing. People are like, how do I go get this information from the Census Bureau? And usually something that the Census Bureau doesn't offer, or can I just get this like industry information? It's usually just not kind of like floating out there readily available. A lot of the free, especially free data sets online are free for a reason, right? They're either fake, or not fake in a bad way, just like it's fake data, or maybe Kaggle will put something up for a competition, but it's tough to go find just data sets of exactly what you need. Usually you're going to find the aggregated numbers. Like I'm thinking of like Packaged Facts. That's like a company that puts out the results of data, their own crunching of the data. But usually you're setting up your own pipelines connecting to your own data or your company's data. Does that answer?
I'm wondering if this person kind of means those free data sets, if they're wondering about like experimenting with data. Are there particular free resources that you like when you get started? Or I'm also thinking of like maybe people who are working on like interview projects and they weren't given a data set maybe.
That does help. Yes, I actually have a blog post of, I've curated a list of free data sets, and I keep adding to it when people tell me about new ones. But Kaggle, for me, is at the top of that list. If you haven't heard of Kaggle, they're pretty cool. They're just, I don't know if they're a nonprofit or they're just they might be a for-profit, but they have, they do competitions, data science competitions, and they also just put the data sets out there. So some of them are real, most of them I think are real world data sets. It's not fake data, but you're usually getting a subset of the data, or you know, you're not getting the kind of full thing. It's not connected to a server or anything. So Kaggle would be my top choice for sure for that. And then otherwise, I do have, and I can send out the link to my free datasets blog post in an email to everybody after the session. There's many more, but you can go through the list, but Kaggle, and I kind of have them in order of which ones are better that I found than others.
I love it. I think that's awesome. And definitely share that link with us. That would be really helpful. All right. So the next question, and again, I know a couple people joined while we were, or joined a little later. If you have a specific data question, you know, feel free to write, I have a specific data question in the chat, and we can flip over so you can present, and then we can kind of go into the nitty gritty of your question. If not, we're just going to run through the pre-submitted questions until someone is brave enough to share their own data. Where and when do you use JavaScript?
This is a great question. So a typical data analyst is probably not using JavaScript at all. If you're like a data analyst, we'll talk about data scientists in a second, but if you're a data analyst, 95% of companies that you work for are just going to expect you to use SQL and then either Excel or Tableau. And then you're going to pull the data from SQL, put it into Excel, Tableau, possibly some other program, but those are by far the two most popular. And then you would do your analysis and then pass that off to the person that asked. You never touch JavaScript. If you're a data scientist, you also usually probably are not touching JavaScript. You're doing other programs like Hadoop, or you're using Python and R, algorithms and all this other stuff, but you're still not doing JavaScript. I do use JavaScript though, because I like deploying visualizations and dashboards to the web, because I think that's a better experience for my clients. When they can see it, like I was saying, from literally any device, anywhere. You don't have to worry about having the same version of Excel, or going and signing up for Tableau, or paying for Tableau, which is super great program, but super expensive. So if you want to deploy your charts, dashboards, whatever, to a web browser, whether it's online for the public to see, or even just an internal, you know, company-only web browser, then you need JavaScript. I use a library called HighCharts, and I believe it is one of the more popular ones out there. I think most of the big companies use it. So I'm going to make a note to myself to also send out the link for HighCharts in that follow-up email. HighCharts is free if you're not using it for commercial, so it's free to practice with, but once you start using it for your company, then they expect you to pay. But it's a great library, and you don't need HighCharts either. You could do it with D3 or some other library. Some of them are free. But as soon as you want to put that chart on the web, you need JavaScript.
And a good question in the chat, how do you write SQL queries in the Jupyter Notebook?
That's a great question. And let me share my screen.
Let me stop so you can...
Oh yeah, no problem. Risha, do you already have Jupyter Notebook set up, or are you starting from square one where like you're not even sure how to get Jupyter Notebook up and running?
How do I stop? Oh, there we go. There we go. She has it up and running, yes.
Okay, that was yes, it's up and running. Okay,
yes.
Let me share my screen. So, right, on a Mac, it is, you just go to your command line and you type in.
Barb, we can't see your screen yet.
Yep, I'm getting there.
Okay.
Type in Jupyter Notebook, and I think this is one I had that was already running. So you're in the directory, and I'm just going to pull it up so everybody can see. And you need to make a connection to your SQL database. So here, Jupyter Notebook just pulled up in a browser, and it's pointing to my desktop, all the files on my desktop. I'm just going to make a new one, and I don't have the code exactly off the top of my head, but I probably can find it pretty easily. You know, I think I just recently did this too. I'm going to open up Slack. I'm so sorry if you all hear the Slack pinging in the background. I closed it so I couldn't do that, but I think I recently sent code to someone for this on Slack. But you have to make a connection to the SQL server first, and then you can write the query within Jupyter, and it will send the query to Postgres or MySQL or whatever SQL program you're using, and then that program will send the data back. So let me just pull this up and see if I can even get some sample code here for you. Although it is, Risha, are you using, and I can't see the chat anymore, I'm sorry, do you use Postgres? Do you know Microsoft's SQL Server?
She said she's been, she said she's been trying since today morning how to connect Postgres.
Good, very good. Yeah, that's the one I was hoping you were going to say. Okay. So there is, you need the username and password for your database or your server. And then you're going to need some kind of library. So the example I just found, I just did a quick search here, is PyODBC or whatever this one is called. You're going to have use some library. I think I've used other libraries in the past, but this one is probably fine. And then you see this whole like con.cursor, you have to like open the connection, you have to have your username, your server name, host name, all that. And then you can execute, as you can see here, they're executing an actual SQL query. So it's gonna look something like this. What I can do too, I don't know how you wanna do this, Lauren, it's up to you. We can either try to like walk through this now and off the top of my head and troubleshoot, or I can establish the connection and get working code and then send it out when we're done so we can get to the other questions. I'm fine with either.
Yeah, I'm cool to go through this right now unless anyone else on the call has other questions too. This is meant to be interactive, so we can totally see what's going on.
Okay, great. And I think I am finding the one. So the library that I usually use, I found it here, is PSYCOPG2. Let me see if I can get an example of that. And Risha, you are going to have to install it if you don't already have it. So this is kind of a pain in Jupyter Notebook. Some of the modules already come pre-installed and some don't. So for example, if I were to say import pandas, it's going to know what it is because that's something that comes pre-installed typically with Jupyter Notebook. But sometimes there's going to be ones that are not pre-installed, and then you have to install them, and it is a little bit more annoying in Jupyter than it would be elsewhere. So give me a second, I can get you the code for that. I know I just did that recently. And the way that you're going to have to do it is you have to, like, if you're familiar with the terminal, you could also do it in your terminal, but it gets really complicated. I would just do it right in Jupyter. Jupyter pip, and I'm going to send this link in the chat to everyone. So this is a pretty good web page that walks you through it. And I don't think this one is something that, I don't think any of these are going to be pre-installed. I think you are going to have to install them. I might already have them installed, which is why it would work for me, but you might need to install it. So once it's installed, let's see if I can get a connection to database here. And let's do it, we'll try one or both of these and see if it works. So I think I have a fake database that I can, or a database I can get us connected to. Unless, I don't know if you're allowed, Risha, are you allowed to give us your database host username and password?
Risha's also asking, does she need to install PyODBC?
Yeah, let's try it with this second one first, and then we'll come back up, and if this one doesn't work, we'll do it with the PyODBC. But let's, this is the one I'm more familiar with. Let's try that one if you don't mind. We'll do that one first. And then Risha, yeah, do you have any kind of credentials that we're allowed to use as an example?
She's installed Scicog too.
I see in the chat here. Yeah. Okay.
You guys have your own language. I feel very naive saying these words.
Okay, I'm going to use credentials for my own database since Risha is not responding about that. But everyone, please don't try to hit my database. It's just, that will just drive my costs way up. This is just for an example to make sure it gets tested. So I had a timeline website I did. Let me see. And you have to have your credentials. Oh, she's trying. Okay, take your time. I'll just put in mine for now. And the port is 4532, great. And I need this really long password. So you just need to put in all these credentials, and you would literally just take this exact code. And I think we can actually just run this, and it's probably going to give me, oh no, actually it did connect. So I must have had PyScop PG2 connected as well. None of us know how to say these, Lauren, by the way.
Okay, that makes me feel a little better.
So then we can actually, let's execute a query here. I'm trying to remember what the tables are for this off the top of my head. I don't. So let me just, I'm going to pull up a table here. 30 seconds. I mean, I'm going to pull up, I'm going to look at it in Postgres. If I can find an example. Just grabbing my table names. Okay, so one of them is Django session. This is a Django site. So Django session, and parser.fetch1, and we're just gonna print the record. Oh, this will do what we want. Oh, sorry, I did a bad SQL thing. From, you have to do a valid query. Great, so it looks like it's pulling back my data from, so this connection is working. So this is the code that I'll send to you, Risha, and then you should literally be able to just take this and replace user, password, host, and database with the name of your stuff, and it should work. All this extra stuff, you actually don't need this. For example, this accept, the try and accept, that's just saying if the connection fails, it will print that error message for you, but I could literally get rid of all of this and it will still, oops, sorry, I forgot one thing here. I can give it a try. But the point is it should still work. I'm just missing something silly, unexpected end of line. And yeah, you have to unindent everything. Python is a pain with indentation, but you really don't need the except and the finally. That's just kind of extra stuff that, yeah, see, there you go. So I'll send it to you without all that extra stuff that looks a little bit scary. You don't need this either. Just, you know what the properties are. And yep, so I'll send you this basic code and that'll pull it.
That's awesome. And she says, thank you. And she just started learning about how to write SQL query on Jupyter Notebook. That is awesome. So I hope this is helpful. Hey, all right. So
You need me to stop sharing one.
okie dokie, let me get the other screen back up. And then, keep the questions coming. We're totally in for this interactive session. That's the point here. If not, can you all see my screen?
Coming. Yes.
There we go. Awesome. So let's do this one. So I'm working on a data set with 14,993 rows. Some of the columns have missing values, the value in a text string format. Would you recommend the columns with the missing values be filled in with the most frequent value of that feature? How is it going to impact my prediction model?
This is another great question. They're all great questions. So what I was always, and people do this differently. It is very subjective. It depends on, what the instruction is that you're getting, the context of your particular problem. But the general guidelines that I was always taught was, if it's a small data set or you've lost like a high percentage of the data, so now the data is too small or you don't have enough data for like a particular category, then you want to impute, which is what this person is getting at when they say replace the missing values with the most frequent value from that column. And then there's so many ways to impute. It doesn't always have to be the most frequent value or the most common value, the mode of that column. It could be the average. You could take the average of the column, median, some other value that you want and put it in. If you have a lot of data, like I'm talking even in the hundreds, I would say is probably enough. And there's only a couple rows that are missing values. It's not even worth imputing. You'll pretty much get the same answer whether you fill that value in or not. So I don't think it's something you have to worry about for larger data sets or where a small percentage of your data is bad. But if I have a great example, I actually did a project which was published with the statistician. He had a Latin square design, and this is an article that's freely available on the web. He did it 30 years ago and then got permission to just republish it as a case study, where a Latin square, you can only have, a square amount. It's like a very specific type of design. And the case was he was weighing trash trucks in New York City. New York City thought that the trucks were not carrying the capacity that was promised in the contract. So they had the statistician that I worked for, they commissioned him to design a study to find out statistically if they were carrying the amount or not. And as you can imagine, it's super difficult and costly to weigh a trash truck that's full of trash. So he couldn't get hundreds of data points. He was limited to this Latin square design where he had 25. Well, 2 of the 25 came back and there was a problem with the weight. They weren't usable. So in that case, that's a great example of when you do need to impute, and that's what he did. He needed 25 for that design. He had to impute. It was a very small sample already. So he took the average of the other trash trucks' weights that did come back and put those in for the missing values. So that's an example. And then, yeah, it doesn't always have to be the mode. You could pick other options. But I think this person kind of got that with the follow-up question is, it's only going to impact your prediction model. Like I said, if it's a small data set or you have a lot of missing data, if you have hundreds of rows of data, imputing to is going to do not, you're not going to change your answer at all.
So interesting. And that sounds like a fascinating statistician job. I am so intrigued.
It's a cool project, yeah.
Awesome. So another good question, how much time does it take to master Python?
It takes a while. I didn't really feel fully comfortable. I think I was working with it for at least 6 months to a year before I felt really, really comfortable with what I was doing. You might be faster than me, but I was working with R on the job and then kind of transitioned to Python, and it was it's a tough language. It's tougher than SQL. I would argue maybe not as tough as Java, maybe in between somewhere, in case those reference points are helpful for anyone. But I would expect months at least, yeah.
And do you have any recommendations for courses or places to start, or what's like a good kind of like starting path for someone who's interested to get into it?
There's so many for Python. There's so many free ones out there. There's paid ones, DataCamp, General Assembly. They're expensive, but there's many free options too. I think Codecademy has free options. You can get started on those. I think finding a project is the best way to get started on. I feel like that's the case with almost everything, but especially coding. You have a defined goal, you're interested in it, it's a real world application. Like going to a Code for America chapter there. I don't know if anyone has heard of Code for America, but they have like a brigade in most major American cities. I know we have one in Philadelphia, and they're such a great group, and they take on real world projects, usually for nonprofits or the local government. And then you can actually get real world experience. You can have activity on your GitHub, and you're working towards a goal. So it's a very practical application, and they'll be very patient and let you learn right there with them. So they're a great resource. And or something like that, you can even go up to a nonprofit and offer your services. But I think finding a project will be the best way to do it.
I love that. That's such good advice. And what was that? It was called Code Brigade?
Code for America.
Okay.
So my brigade is called Code for Philadelphia.
Gotcha. That's awesome. Very cool. Awesome. So I got to move our faces so I can read this one. If I need to find a way to get statistics in terms of how well workers perform compared to others, and for it to be statistically significant, what program should I use? Please specify the most basic to the most sophisticated software program for the data input / extrapolation. Does it require a manual data entry, or can I extrapolate the data from a particular software program or platform? I am working in the pathology field. I screen slides, and once the histology or results come back, I need to work out how many discordant cases versus concordant cases there are for comparison. Business analytics and performance analytics. but if I cannot attend the webinar live, can I mention and address this when I view the recorded webinar? Can I email you further for more information? Thank you for your help.
Yes to all. So yeah, longer question. Yes, you can do, it sounds like a hypothesis test, and I have to like, give a disclaimer. The joke is how many different answers are there to a given statistics question, and it's how many statisticians are in the room. I mean, there's a lot of this is very contextual. Same thing with that previous question was even more contextual and subjective. But this one sounds like a hypothesis test if I understand what's being asked. So you would see is there a statistically significant difference between the one group versus the other, and you need either an average or a proportion to do that test. There's a statistics cheat sheet, if you've heard of the For Dummies book series. They have a funny name, but they actually have a really great statistics cheat sheet. So I'll send that out too. And yes, you can definitely email me and I can look at it. I'm happy to look at it in more detail once you actually send the data so I can fully understand what's going on. But for anyone who's looking for just general stats resources too, they're great. And then if you get, I'm sure most of you are familiar with the AP program for high school students. Any of the study guides for the AP statistics course, they're actually very, very good. They're very cheap, not a textbook. Kaplan, Barron's, like the test prep companies put them out. It's shockingly comprehensive, and it goes over like pretty much everything that you would need for just like, basic statistical analyses. So that was a small digression. I know this person is also asking what programs would you use for this? You can run hypothesis tests in Excel. You have to have the data analysis tool pack, but that's an option. Python can obviously do hypothesis tests. I don't remember exactly which package it's in. I don't know if it's in Pandas or one of the other math packages, but I'm positive it's there somewhere. I've never tried it in Tableau. I imagine you can do it in Tableau, but I don't know that for certain. And then in terms of like most basic to most sophisticated, all of your point and click programs, I would call them most basic because you don't have to do any coding to get to the answer. So Excel, Minitab is another one. They're kind of expensive, but they're point and click and they do hypothesis testing. And then I would guess Tableau. And then the more sophisticated or I guess more customizable, where you can kind of keep on going with the analysis would be Python, R. I don't know of any other paid sophisticated ones because most people I think do use Python or R for that. Did I get all of this person's questions?
Yeah, I think so. And this is probably a naive question on my own selfishness, but is Python something that you can kind of just like learn or put together to do like one statistical analysis, or is it something that you really need to like learn and develop your skills over time?
It's hard when it is hard to just like look at Python for the first time and just try to. I feel like that, and Risha, don't correct me if I'm wrong, but that might have been what you were feeling with the SQL thing, where you're like, I have this one specific goal, but it's hard without maybe having that underlying understanding of like what's going on. So it's not impossible. Like you could, pull it up and find some code, like an example snippet online, and put it in. But it's really hard to know what's like actually happening. And then if you do need to change something, which is almost always the case, right? Like it's not going to be exactly what the example is. Then it starts getting really tough of like knowing what to change and whatnot. So like you can use it for one thing. It just might be hard without knowing like, oh, square brackets means a list. It's not just, there for some other reason, or I need a colon. It won't work without the colon and the indentation and stuff like that. Does that answer?
Yeah, no, it definitely does. I'm just thinking that like I would have to like Google Google Sheets to do something on, or, on Excel kind of to figure this out anyway. So if that's like the simple method to do it, I just didn't know if that's like that exponentially more simple than kind of learning Python.
Oh yeah, for sure. Doing it in Excel is much easier. Yes.
Interesting. Awesome. So what are some easy turnkey resources that can help us educate ourselves on the subject matter? So I know you mentioned obviously some great courses, but are there any books or resources or blogs or podcasts or anything like that that you recommend for people?
Yeah, this question is a little bit vague. So if the person who is asking it is here and you want to clarify, by all means. But I assume they mean just like data analytics in general. There's a great book by Naomi Robbins called Creating More Effective Graphs. I heard her speak at the American Statistical Association Philadelphia chapter meeting, so she was great. There's another book, Storytelling with Data. These are I think those are two big topics right now in data, or I'm sorry, that is one big topic in data analytics, is like actually getting your message across with the data, instead of just like, okay, crunch the numbers. Everyone kind of doesn't get to over that next hurdle though. Like you have to be able to explain what you did and get other people to understand it, which can be a real challenge. And you can show data in a really misleading way sometimes, and the books will help you prevent making that error. The first one, Creating More Effective Graphs, is more like a reference book, whereas the second one is more like a reading book. So I don't know if people have different preferences. You could kind of pick one over the other. I don't know of any good Excel resources, and I'm asked that question all of the time. So in the next couple months, I was actually thinking of developing some. I mean, I have been working on my blog to answer common questions that I get, but just practice problems in Excel, because I don't know of any. I heard DataCamp might be coming out with courses in Excel, but I don't know of any just like practice Excel.
That would be awesome.
Yeah. For SQL, there's a lot. HackerRank is, and actually HackerRank is great for Python too. Python and SQL, they have practice problems where there's no course. It's just, it's free and you answer questions. They can get tough. And then Stanford University has a great SQL course where it is a course and questions, but it's very difficult. Like I would not start with the Stanford course for those just starting with SQL. I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. Yeah, there's so many, I feel like so many free resources too that people can utilize. It's just going to take a little Googling.
For the coding, yes.
Yeah.
I haven't seen many quality ones for Excel, but for coding, there are so many.
Right. Definitely gotta get some Excel in there. Can you share your blog name, Barbara?
I'll put it in the chat, and then I'll also send it out in the email.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
That's good.
So another question, currently I know, and this actually I think is our last pre-submitted question, so definitely add more in the chat if you guys want to talk more specifics. But currently I know how to do Excel and SQL only. Now I am trying to add a new skill set. What do you suggest to learn next, and what will be helpful when finding a new job? I'm in the IT field doing data as a data analyst and interested in doing more with data. I believe you may give suggestions from the following languages: Tableau, Qlik, Python, R, JavaScript. What's your opinion? Good question.
Yeah, I get this question a lot too. It is a great question. So let's talk briefly about the difference between data analysts and data scientists, and then what's in between. Data analysts, like I said before, is typically Excel, SQL. You're just making charts. You're usually not doing statistical analysis, which is still really helpful, but you're like you might make a scatter plot, but you won't take that next step to do the linear regression as a data analyst, but you can still interpret just the scatter plot as it is. And then data scientist is a huge leap from data analyst. That you need either Python or R. You need to know heavier statistics, linear regression, the hypothesis tests, all that. You need to know how to use these specialized programs for machine learning and dealing with massive amounts of data, like Hadoop, or I'm blanking on Google's program name right now, but Google has one that's really popular. And then you typically also need to just generally kind of understand coding and some of the lower level stuff too, like Excel, Tableau, or the point and click programs. I have seen hybrid jobs coming out, or I've had people tell me they're applying to them. So like, for example, Amazon, or like one of the bigger companies, they may have like a hybrid where you're in between an analyst and a scientist, but most companies, unless you're going to work in Silicon Valley, the super high end, are probably just going to have that distinction. So if you want to become, like, if your next step is to go to data science, then yeah, I would definitely start with, I would personally choose Python over R. And I think most people would say that. I don't want to speak for everyone out there, but I think that most people would tell you that's probably a better route for more jobs and just more, being able to do more. And then I would definitely choose, I would start learning, like take a course in Spark or something like that. I think DataCamp has courses in Spark. And then you'd need to have more stats. And for stats, some people might be okay with you learning that on the job, since I think there is such a high demand now for data scientists. They know not everyone has a degree or has taken classes in it, but a community college course in statistics, or I'm sure there are stats like statistics.com offers courses. So that's, I mean, for data science, it's a lot more. If you're just trying to get better at a data analyst position, which is not a bad thing to do, they're cozy, well-paid jobs too. I would say I would not learn Tableau unless your company is specifically asking, because Tableau is very expensive, so not many companies want to pay for it. And Qlik is also relatively niche and obscure. So I probably wouldn't go for either of those unless you know you're going to have to use them or it would help. I would probably say, I guess my next step would be Python, because then you're going to be able to start doing the things that you can't do in Excel but want to do, like the charts that Excel doesn't offer. And once you hit 1 million rows and you can't even use Excel, Python will overcome all of those barriers and you'll be able to break down those walls that you're hitting in Excel. And Tableau probably will too, but again, it's so expensive. Most companies are not in a position to pay for it. So long-winded again, sorry, but I hope that answers the question.
No, that was great. And I'm so interested in kind of like all the differences between all of these different languages. And I think you did a really good job of kind of explaining and, why you should pick one over the other. But just, it seems like such a tough decision when you're kind of starting out, which one to go with and why. And that kind of obviously is shaping your career path. So it's important.
Oh, absolutely.
Cool. So that was our last pre-submitted question. I would love to just take another minute or two. And if anyone on the line wants to, share any more data or questions or issues that they're running into, or Barb, I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to share. Risha's asking specifically, what skill set should I master to get a data analyst job? She's done a couple of courses on data science.
So again, for a data analyst, a typical data analyst job, it would be Excel and SQL would be your two big things to master. If you mentioned data science, I mean, if you want to keep going, then it would be all those other things I just talked about. Python, you'd have to have more stats background. And then you would want machine learning and a big data program like Hadoop or Spark or something like that. But for just data analyst, it would be, I think if you can get SQL down and Excel down really, really well and can show in an interview that you know how to do it, like you're coming in with a project, for example, that you've already completed, that would be probably more than enough. Some of them might say, oh, we use Tableau, but they're not going to be, I can't speak for every employer, but they're probably not going to be too worried if you don't know Tableau, because it's point and click, so they know you can probably pick it up quickly, but you can't pick up SQL very quickly. So that one I would have down.
Are there specific projects that employers look for when, going into the interview that look better from a data analytics perspective that you think people should add to their portfolios that kind of show just knowledge and skills, kind of like with coding?
I would imagine that the top tier or most ideal thing to have would be a real world corporate project. I think a second tier would be like a nonprofit project, which those are typically very corporate projects too. I shouldn't really even put them on another tier because they're businesses, they're not for profit, but they function as businesses as well. And then after that would come the ones I think from like classes that you've taken and anything that can just show that you really, it's very clear that this person has done X, Y, Z. Like, I can see they've written these SQL queries or made XYZ in Excel. Like that's the best type of project you can have.
Yeah, I'm thinking for someone obviously who doesn't have much experience, they haven't had, that job. And I know you mentioned kind of getting involved with those not-for-profits or, volunteering. If like anything else, like side project would kind of shine in an interview.
Yeah. I guess if they found their own data and did a side project, I mean, right, you can go on Kaggle and do your own analysis of any of those data sets. I do think the others would probably look better, but that's an option.
Yeah, absolutely. And then what about data visualization? Is that an important skill to kind of hone?
Yeah, it's harder for employers, I think, to test that, which is why it doesn't come up as much. But I think it's really important. As I was saying before, if you can't communicate your findings, then they're almost useless. I mean, it's really hard to get a point across sometimes with charts because other people are not looking at charts as much as you might be. So there's a struggle for them to read it. So making effective charts, I think, is skill number one. Like being able to say, I know the difference between an ineffective chart and an effective one. So for example, like 3D is never acceptable. That's just confuses people. You have two different points for the same data point, like two different reference areas. There's many issues with 3D. So that's just widely considered unacceptable. And then also, like, you know, if you have a chart, I see a lot of people, they'll put a line over a bar chart or do like a very complex side-by-side bar when a scatter plot might have been a cleaner option. So picking the right visualizations for the data, and I have a cheat sheet for that. I'll send that out as well. And then also making sure your graph is effective and not too cluttered, you know, someone can understand it, you know, zooming in on the points. Those are the big things, is effectiveness in choosing the correct chart.
That's great. Such good information. Anything else in the chat? I know we're about 10 minutes to time. I'm impressed. I was worried about the number of questions, but we got a lot covered in this 50 minutes. Do you think there's anything that we're missing, Barb, that we should talk about? You know, maybe about.
I didn't have any particular, you know, expectations or you know, things that I was thinking of. It was truly an open session for people to ask questions. I'm trying to think of more common questions that I get though. These are very common ones. I guess I also get I usually get a lot of questions about where to practice SQL, which I did cover, and translating business questions into SQL queries. A lot of people seem to struggle with that, and that's a tough one as well. And it's just, you know, I always tell people, try to make like a list and have it by your desk or something like that, and have there's only a limited number of options, right? And really get to know those options really well, and then look for keywords in the queries. So the keyword by is usually indicating you're going to need to do a group by, or if you see that the question asks for variables that are in two separate tables, you're probably going to have to do a join or a union or something like that. So there's like little hints, and those are like basic examples, but you know, expected value usually means you're calculating an average, like kind of putting those things together. I'm hoping to get a blog post out on that soon, because I get that question a lot. But that is a challenge for people, and the best thing I could say is kind of really getting familiar with the options, and then kind of getting those keywords in the question and translating them and piecing it together step by step.
That's awesome. And this just made me think of something else too. If you're getting stuck on your code, especially for people who don't, you know, either aren't in a role or are practicing, or, you know, kind of trying to up their skills, what resources are out there? Obviously we're having this talk today, but you know, on a day-to-day basis, you know, are there communities for people to kind of troubleshoot and help with, you know, all of this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would say is really do Google the error, and I know how frustrating it can be to get those errors, especially when you're just starting out and it's just like, what in the world does this mean? And it's all kind of new. But Googling is the number one thing you can do, and limit your Google results to the past year. I don't know if many people realize that you can do that, but it'll put the more relevant answers up top, typically for technical questions. So maybe for other questions, you don't want to, you know, like you're searching to, I don't know, book tickets for a trip or something, you don't want to limit it for that. But for tech questions, you know, things are changing so rapidly. You only want the results from the last year. Sometimes I even want from the last month. So keep that in mind. And then Stack Overflow is the number one resource that coders use for getting those questions answered. People upvote the answers on Stack Overflow. So usually the correct answer floats up to the top instead of having to dig through like a forum where you don't know who's giving the right answer. And then finally, I have a LinkedIn question and answer group where people can ask questions. I'm contemplating actually making a Slack for questions too. I think people are starting to like Slack a lot more, but I can send out the group, but you can post a question in that group anytime. It's free. And myself and a couple other analysts hang out there, and we will answer if we can. And if not, we'll try to point you in the right direction. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I was hoping to shamelessly plug yourself, because I love that group, and I know people from our last chat really enjoyed it, or are enjoying it. So I wanted to make sure we talked about that. That's awesome. This has been really great. And, as always, I think all of the information that you provide is so helpful. And I really love, hearing from all of you, getting your questions answered, and really kind of diving into some of these questions that you can't find real answers to out on the internet, or maybe, aren't comfortable asking. So I really appreciate you kind of logging on with us today, Barb, and sharing all your knowledge.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yay. So last call, if there are any other questions, pop them in the chat now. If not, I'll give you back 8 minutes of your day. But this was really, really, really great. I really love, kind of diving into the code here. I feel like we should do an Excel. An Excel chat would be awesome. But yes, so tomorrow we're going to be talking about the Microsoft Teals organization. So it's all about inspiring, future generations in tech. So I highly encourage everyone to check that out. Join that chat. There's an interview prep session on Monday. And then, gosh, I haven't even looked at the events for next week. So definitely check out our live events pages, sign up, watch the recordings. This one will be going out to everyone tomorrow or sometime next week. And I hope to see everyone virtually very, very soon. And as always, thanks to Barb. She's amazing.
We can learn.
Awesome. Bye, everyone.